Hello, everyone. My name is Fiona.
My name is Kat.
And my name is Mackenzie.
And we want to welcome you to
The Couch Potato Lab,
where we bring the science to you. Let's meet our scientists now. I have on my left here.
Hello, my name is Kat. My pronouns are she and her. And a fun fact about me is I am very lactose intolerant. That's right, when I was in grade 10, I did a test at the hospital where you just drink. Lactose is actually a sugar, and so I just drank some water dissolved with lactose, and then you blow in this tube and they graph your results, and my results went off the graph. So that means that I was really lactose intolerant. So I try to either steer away from lactose containing products, or I actually take a lactase pill, which is the enzyme that I'm missing to digest lactase.
Sweet.
All right. My name is Fiona. My preferred pronouns are she, her. And a little fun fact about me is that I've been spending a lot more time at home, so I have been really enjoying gardening. I would say it's my new hobby. All right, and the other scientist we have with us today on my right.
I'm Mackenzie. My pronouns are she, her.
Let's dig into today's episode. That was a joke. Alrighty, so I have a plant here. I'm having some issues though. As I mentioned, I'm really big into gardening lately, and I have this plant, but it looks pretty sad, and it's got some leaves that are kind of old, and they're kind of saggy here, and I don't know what I'm doing wrong because I've been watering it. I think I've been taking care of it. It's in a pot. So I don't know what I'm doing wrong. Mackenzie, would you maybe know?
Well, can I take a look at it for a second?
Yeah.
Okay. So I think that we need to look beneath the surface. And before we get started into our plant, I just want to take a minute to recognize the land that we're on today. So we're actually coming to you live from Treaty 4 territory, which is home of the Nehiyawak, Nakaway, Nakota, Lakota, and Dakota peoples, as well as the homeland of the Métis-Michif Nation. So we want to invite you to recognize where you are today and the land that we're exploring and learning about today. So this plant right here, Fiona, it looks kind of like it's growing up here, but I think that to really examine this, we need to go below the surface because, well, I don't think that that's very alive, and well, besides the fact that I can take it out of the pot and it looks like you haven't watered it in about 47 years, I think that there might be some other things going on as well. And I think it might have something to do with this brown substance right here. And we call those substances dirt or soil. So Kat, can you explain the differences between dirt and soil?
Yes, Mackenzie. So dirt and soil aren't the same thing. And I actually only learned this back in our exceptional eco-columns episode, that soil is alive and dirt is dead. So soil has living organisms in it. It has things like worms, fungi, insects, bacteria, and organic matter. And all of these things help create naturally occurring nutrients and minerals, which is great for things to grow in. And this makes soil a complete and self-sustaining ecosystem.
Wow, that's really fascinating. But I have a question because I have this sign behind me, and it looks like we have some soil that's wanted. But it says it's wanted dead or alive. But you said that there's alive stuff in the soil. So, Mackenzie, can we really have it dead?
No, that's a great catch, Fiona. In fact, if it's dead, then it's called dirt. So the two main differences between dirt and soil is that dirt is dead and soil is living. So it can get a little bit confusing because all soil was once dirt. It's made up of soil, clay, and silt, but soil has those living organisms and those minerals and those nutrients that Kat was talking about, whereas dirt has none of those things. And there's a few different things that we can look at and look for to figure out if it's dirt or if it's soil. So there is 4 main components of soil. They're color, texture, structure, and acidity. So I have 2 cups here. This one has soil in it. This one has dirt in it. So the first thing I'm going to do to figure out which is which, I mean, I already know, but when I was collecting these from my yard this morning, I wanted to know the difference. So the first thing you can kind of do is just take a quick smell of them. So if you smell this one, it smells kind of like earthy, like it reminds me of the smell when it just rained. Whereas this one, it smells really dusty. And that's because there's nothing in there. It's not very fertile. Another thing you can kind of do, it's kind of hard to tell on camera, but they're completely different colors. So the dirt right here, you can see it's like lighter and more dusty, and this one is really dark. It's closer to the color of black, and this one's more like kind of grayish or light brown. And then another thing you can do to test if it's dirt or soil is you can try to compact it. And by that I mean squish it down and see if it gets smaller. So if I squish down my dirt, it's not really squishing. It's kind of as tight as it can go. Whereas if I do the same thing with my soil, you can see here, I'm going to push it down. Oh, whoa. You can see that it's a little bit more, you can squish it more. Not a lot because there's not a lot of air pockets between it, but you can still compact it a little bit.
Wow.
So that's one of the things you can do to tell the difference there. So as we said, they're made up of the same things. It's just that this one has a few different components, like those nutrients, minerals, and different living organisms and things like that. Does that make sense to you, Fiona?
Yeah, I think it does. That's actually really fascinating. I didn't realize how much of a difference there was when you try to compact it. There was a really big change there. But I do have to ask, do you scientists know, like, can we see the different stuff that's in the soil? Can we, like, maybe separate it somehow?
That's a great question. And me and Kat are experts on this, actually. So me and Kat, we got so excited, we come up with a soil shakedown. So what we're going to do is I'm going to get a jar. If you want, you can follow along and do this at home. So I have a plain old glass jar. Now, what are we putting in here, Kat?
So we're actually, we brought some soil from our own homes. So we're going to put this about maybe 2 cups of soil into this jar. So that's the first thing we want to do.
I have a question though. Don't you all live in the same city? Do you think it'll be any different?
Well, me and Kat live in different places. I live a little bit outside of the city. Kat lives in the city, so I'm very interested to see. So hopefully there's a little bit of a difference that we can see. So I have my jar about half full of soil. Now with the other half, I'm going to add in water. So I still want enough room at the top, so I'm going to fill it with water till about like right here. So pretty much about the same amount of water in there as I did dirt.
Ooh.
And that's probably about good right there. Yeah, and it's just going to bubble a little bit just because it's getting into the dirt at the bottom. Or I should say soil. It's a tongue twister. Now I'm gonna make sure I put this lid on super, super tight. And why is it important that it's so tight, Kat? What are we doing next?
Next, we're going to be having a shake-off with our soil. So we're going to be shaking our jars for about a minute because we want to shake it up so that we can help those layers and all those different things, the sand, the silt, and the clay separate so that we can really see the different layers inside our jar.
All right, well, you said shake it up, but I think we should shake it off.
Shake it off?
Yeah, I think I'm ready.
I think I'm ready too.
Okay, ready?
Are we gonna have a little dance party here?
Oh yeah, of course.
Oh yeah.
Ready?
Hit it!
Whew.
Oh yeah.
But I keep cruising, won't stop moving. Like I got this music in my mind saying it's gonna be alright. 'Cause the player's gonna play, 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 play. And the hater's gonna hate, 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 hate. Baby, I'm just gonna shake, 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 shake. Shake it off, shake it off. Heart, break, 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 break. And Vader's gonna fake, 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 fake. Baby, I'm just gonna shake, 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 shake. Shake it off, shake it off. That's what they don't see. That's what they don't see. And I'm dancing on my own.
Dancing on my own and make moves up as I go.
Moves up as I go.
Woo!
That's what they don't know.
That's what they don't know.
All right.
Oh,
I think it's been a minute.
Whew.
Do they look good and shaken up?
yeah, I'd say so.
Yeah. It kind of looks
Alright.
like chocolate milk right now.
So, do we see the layers? Are they there?
You see, the next step to this is we kind of have to do the opposite.
Oh.
We have to let it sit there. We're just going to let it chill out maybe for a few minutes, and we're going to come back to that at the end. And what we're hoping it's going to do right now is separate into the layers of silt, sand, clay, and then water at the very top. So we're just going to let it chill out because luckily we invited our jar of soil to the dance party. And yeah, you can actually already see the separation there.
Wow.
So we're just going to give it a few more minutes and hopefully it'll come even more prominently. But yeah, for now we're just going to let that chill out there. Hopefully I'm going to be able to catch my breath.
Yeah.
Another thing that soil does is it likes to hold water, you said?
Yeah, so that's right. So we kind of talked about how there have those 4 properties. So the structure, so that's kind of like the different particles that it's made up, and we're actually testing that right here in our jar. So we'll look at that in a few minutes. But another one that I said was texture. And texture, sometimes I think of texture as how it feels, and that is true. That is how it feels. But the texture and structure of this actually has something to do with what scientists call water retention. Now, Kat, talking about water retention, I know that plants need lots of water. So is there some way we can test this water retention to make sure that our soil is keeping up that water?
Yes, Mackenzie. So if you want to follow along at home, the materials that we have got ready are we have 3 different pop bottles that you can see we have cut the tops off just with some scissors. If you want to do this at home, maybe get a parent or guardian to help you out. So we've cut those tops off, flip them upside down, and then we're also going to grab some coffee filters, and we're going to place these coffee filters inside that cut off top.
Yeah, so we're just putting this coffee filter in here just so that the soil or dirt, whatever we put in here, doesn't fall straight through. We just want the water to go through. So we have our bottles set up like Kat was saying. Now, in science, we want to test different things and change what we call a variable. So our variable is what we're changing. So right now, these 3 structures here, my pop bottles, the top, and the coffee filters, they're all the exact same. Now, the thing we're going to be changing is the substance that we put inside. So I went out to my garden this morning and I grabbed a bucket of soil from my garden. I'm going to put that soil in this one. In this one, my mom loves to garden. She had a bag of potting soil that she bought from the store. That's what I'm going to put in this one. And then in this one, I'm going to use that dirt. Now, I got this dirt from my backyard. And the thing about getting dirt from your backyard is that it's probably most likely not just pure dirt. It's probably got a little bit of soil in there, but it's on its way to becoming dirt. And the reason I say that is because dirt is completely sterile. And by that, I mean that there's no living things in there. And because outside there's so many different things interacting with it, whether it's like the storms, the weather, the plants, the grass blowing into my yard, there's most likely something living in here, but we did the test before and it is mostly dirt. So I'm gonna go ahead and dump this in here. And you'll notice also that we were trying to establish our control, so keep some things as constant as we can. So me and Kat were very careful to make sure that we have exactly 1 cup of dirt, 1 cup of this soil, and 1 cup of this soil. So we're not changing too many different things. We're only changing the type, not the amount. So I think that Kat is doing the same thing. Now, Kat, where did you get your soils from this morning?
So I got my soil from my backyard underneath a nice birch tree, and in this dirt there was different grass growing. There were some lilies growing in this dirt, and then our host Fiona actually brought some dirt. So I have some of Fiona's, or soil I should say. So I've got some of Fiona's soil, and then I also have that dirt. So Fiona, where did you get your soil from?
Well, I got that soil out of my father's vegetable garden. So we have lots of different veggies growing there, potatoes, tomatoes, beans. So I would really hope that it is soil and that it's alive, because those vegetables need to be able to get those nutrients to be able to go big and strong so that they can go in my tummy.
All right. So I have my 3 different types of substances here. So these 2 are soil. This one is dirt. So our next step here, you can follow along and do this at home as well, is I'm going to put a cup of water into each of these bottles. So I'm going to just carefully pour it. And what we're trying to test here is to see how much of the water retains or stays in the soil up above the coffee filter and how much of it filters through. So I'm going to do this one at a time. So I'm just going to pour that cup of water in there. And I'm going to do the exact same thing with the exact same amount of water for each of my soils.
Wow, it doesn't seem like in that first one there's not a lot of dirt coming out.
No.
Or soil, I guess it would be then.
Oh.
All right.
Pour a little too much.
Science can be a little messy sometimes, and that's okay. All right. So, Kat, have you started to put any of yours in at all?
I'm going to test the same thing. I can actually see there are some living organisms definitely crawling around inside my soil. So here we go. The first one.
Oh
We'll
my
add that water
goodness.
to.
Are you talking about ants?
Yes, I am talking about ants. There are definitely some red fire ants crawling around in my soil.
Is that
Kat.
why you were dancing so good, Kat? Did you have ants in your pants too?
I think there must have been some ants in my pants. That has to explain it.
You're crazy.
Now I'm adding the water to Fiona's soil.
Oh, I really hope it's soil. My dad would be very happy.
All
And
right.
then the dirt.
Now, while Kat's doing that, I just want to look over here. So this one right here, this was my potting soil. And the thing about this one is it's very, very fine. And it's not just pure soil. There's compost and other things added in here. And this is the one that I got from the store. The one from my house, like in my garden, you can see that it's dripping so slowly. There's like one drip at a time, just this teeny little bit. Now this is the dirt. And you can see that there's a pretty steady stream of water coming out of it. And there's a lot more water that's coming out of the dirt than there is the soil. And that's because generally, depending on the type of soil you have and the different mixture, soil retains the water better than dirt. So that is one of the reasons why plants can grow in soil but not in dirt, because it can retain the water a lot better, which the plants rely on to grow.
Wow, that's really interesting. So I guess that makes sense, because if you have a garden, for example, you don't want to be having to water it twice a day, 3 times a day for it to get enough water. You want that water to stay in that soil so that your plants can keep getting that water all throughout the day. Is that right?
Yes, that is right.
All right.
Of course.
And Kat, how are your bottles going?
So mine, it's kind of interesting right now. So my soil, it looks like maybe about half the water's gone through and it's still dripping a little bit, but Fiona's soil, you can see not as much water has passed through it. So it looks like it's retaining more soil than the soil from my house was. And the dirt, it's interesting. It's slowly dripping, but there's not as much water. So, maybe there's more living things in this part of the dirt that I use, but it looks like my dirt is retaining a little bit compared to my soil. But Fiona's soil is looking really good, so I think your dad will be very happy with his soil.
That is interesting. So yeah, I'm just going to let mine go through. I'll move this for just a second. You can actually see on mine, there's a lot of water sitting up top here in my soil, whereas in the dirt one, there's essentially no water left at all. So it's all made its way down, whereas this one is really taking a long time to filter through. And that has a lot to do with the retention as well and how it's filtering through. So that's a really good point to make about soil as well.
Wow, that is really fascinating. Speaking of my dad's garden, he actually told me too, and Ken's mentioned it earlier, that acidity has to do with how well and how healthy your soil is. So my dad mentioned to me before that the pH is really important. So a pH is a scale from 1 to 14. 1 to 7 is acidic, and 7 to 14 is alkaline, it's called. And you kind of want it to be around the 7 range. That's what water is. So I have a really quick example here to demonstrate the different pHs in soil. So what I have here is I have 2 little bowls of plain water, and then I have 1 bowl of the dirt from my garden, or soil, my mistake, and 1 bowl of soil that came from the store. So I'm going to add just a little bit of both to the water, because in order to test the pH, you have to have a solution. You can't just test the dirt itself. It won't really show anything. So I'm going to mix this up, and if there actually is tests I know that you can buy as well for your garden to test the levels of the pH. And in gardens, there are things that you can do to increase or decrease the pH. So you can make it more acidic or less acidic depending on your plants. So I know that if you add compost to your garden, it'll make it it'll kind of regulate it. It'll give your plants more nutrients as well. It makes for an overall a lot healthier of a garden.
And Fiona, what is compost?
So compost is, if you ever have a banana peel or the middle of your apple or even cow poop, you can add that to your garden, and that is all compost. It's all organic materials such as foods or cow poop that you can add, and it just introduces more nutrients and good stuff to your soil. All right, so I think I have a pretty good solution going on here with the 2. I have a pH strip here, and it has these 4 little colors on it, and they will change once I add them into the mixture. So I'm going to start with the one from my garden first. All right, so I dumped it in there, and then what you do on the back of this, you compare it. So I would say that it's about a 7. About a 7? Yeah, I'd say it's closer to a 7, maybe a 6.5 even. And that's actually really good pH for soil. You want it to be around that. That'll be healthy. And I'm going to take another one and dump it in to the soil from the store. And let's take a look. Ooh, I think that this one is closer to a 6 than it is a 7. So the soil from the store is more acidic. So some plants may not like that, so you might have to change some of the nutrients in your soil to make your plants a little happier.
Yeah, so the acidity, it depends on the plant. So some plants like really acidic soil, and some plants just want neutral or basic. So you kind of have to do some research on your plant so you know exactly what it likes. I like to think of it like myself. Maybe I don't like pickles, but I like chips. So you have to think of like some people like this, some people like this, and plants are the same way. They have preference to the soil they eat because they actually use the soil for their nutrients to like eat. That's how plants get their nutrients to grow. And speaking of that, I have these plants here, and I took them from my house, and I want to just show you what's underneath them, because all the time we're looking at what's on top. We're trying to see if our plant is growing based on what it looks like from here up. but we don't often take a look at what's below it. So we've been talking all about soil, and that's right, there is soil, but look at all of these other things in here.
What are those, Kens?
Those are all roots, and those roots, that's why we care so much about soil, because these roots are responsible for taking the nutrients and all of that water that we put into our soil and bringing it up into the plant so it can grow. So it's kind of like these are, if we think about it like this, if we have a glass full of, let's say, milk, and we put a straw in it, and you're sucking it up into your mouth, that's kind of like roots are doing. They're like the straws for the plant. They're sucking up the water and the nutrients into the plant so that the plant can grow bigger and taller and healthier. So that's what's inside a plant. So it's really important that we give our plants a lot of good, healthy soil so that they have the nutrients and water uptake to grow into big, healthy plants.
Wow, do you think you could make me root beer with those roots, Kens?
Fiona, that's a great question, but I think that's a little bit of a different type of root. But, that's a great suggestion. And now that I'm thinking about it, I just want root beer so bad.
That's what I was thinking about. I heard the word root, and I thought, man, I'm a little thirsty. I could use some root beer. I have a little question because we live in Saskatchewan here, and we have a lot of farmers and a lot of farmland. So how do farmers keep their soil healthy?
Well, farmers here in Saskatchewan, there's lots of different things that they can do to keep their soil healthy, but one of the simplest things they can do is called crop rotation. And like Mackenzie was talking about, the soil, we want it to be rich with nutrients and minerals. Well, crop rotation is the practice of cycling through which plants you plant on the same plot of land. So crop rotation was made famous way back in the 1730s by a guy named Charles Townshend. And he actually got the nickname Turnip Townshend because he introduced this idea of crop rotation. And he introduced it using turnips, barley, clover, and wheat. So what their farmers did was they would plant turnips in a field. And after the turnips grew, they would harvest them. And then next, they noticed that when they planted the wheat grew better from using the nutrients and minerals that were left from the turnips. And then when they harvested the wheat and they planted the barley or the clover next, those did better with the nutrients left over from the wheat. And so crop rotation is really easy. It's a really simple, cost-effective way to help plants and crops grow better. It improves the soil structure, the soil fertility, its nutrients, and crop yield. And it also helps reduce the amount of weeds, pests, disease, and pollution in a farm. Yeah, Fiona.
All right.
Whoa, wait. I was just digging in this plant a little more in the roots, and I'm just gonna I found root beer.
What?
Can you imagine?
Oh my
I found
goodness.
root beer. So here, your wish is granted. A little for you.
Oh, I'm
Kat,
very
you want some?
excited.
Oh, yeah!
I got two. You know what? I might even be able to get a third.
Here we go.
Let's see if I can pull
Would
it
you-
out.
Wow, thank
Oh,
you.
More root beer.
Woohoo!
This is absolutely crazy.
Oh
Never.
my goodness.
I've never seen that
This
before.
is a science feat.
It's amazing. It is so amazing. Wow. My mind is blown.
I can't
But
believe I made it.
You really put it out there, and the universe just finds a way to give it to you. Hey?
It's true. It is
Wow.
absolutely crazy. But back to the programming. Fiona, you had a question. You wanted me to do something. What was it? I forget.
All right. Well, I thought it would be kind of interesting to show the audience a little demonstration about how crop rotation works. So, Mackenzie, I know you really love mini eggs and Smarties, so I want you to go ahead and you have a nice bowl of trail mix there, and I think you should eat all of the Smarties and all of the mini eggs in there.
Okay, so I'm going to do this, and I'm actually going to explain crop rotation at the same time. So Fiona said mini eggs and Smarties, and that's right. So I want you to imagine me being a plant. My favorite thing, or my nutrient that I love, is Smarties and mini eggs. So I'm going to plant myself in here, and I'm going to eat out all the Smarties and the mini eggs. All right, here we go. Couple more. I'm going to eat them all up because this is my favorite thing. This is what helps me become happy and grow, just like a crop would. All right, now there's no more left. So then, if I came back to this same crop tomorrow and there was none here, I would be sad. So similarly, this is how crop rotation works with farmers. There's none more of that nutrient that plant relies on. So maybe I could call in Kat. Kat, what's your favorite nut?
I like almonds because they're a great healthy source of fat.
All right, so if Kat came on over to this trail mix or this crop, like we would be saying this represents, Kat would take out all of the almonds.
I'd be a very happy camper.
You would. Now, Fiona, you like raisins, right? You were just eating them.
Oh, I love raisins.
So then Fiona might come by this crop and Fiona might want all the raisins, so she's going to take out all the raisins. And as you can see, if Kat came back or I came back or Fiona came back too quickly, everything is gone. It hasn't had enough time to regenerate. So that is the idea of crop rotation, is that if one plant uses up all of the nutrients that were there before, they plant a different one that doesn't rely on that nutrient, and it gives the soil enough time to regenerate and come back with those nutrients. So farmers will make sure that those nutrients are getting added back into their soil by adding things like compost, or you might see them adding like fertilizers or like cow manure, things like that. And that helps regenerate and put those nutrients back in that soil so it stays really healthy and fertile so that it can still grow the crops later on. So it's not just out of that nutrient forever.
That is super fascinating. We have a question here from the Hayes brothers. They ask, how many types of soil are there? Kat, do you maybe know?
Yes, so there are 3 main types of soil, and they are sand, silt, and clay. Those are the 3 main types of soil.
Yeah, and actually, just to further answer that question, we're going to go back to this. So we said before that we had our soil and that it was made up of sand, silt, and clay. So the main differences in soil is those ratios. So if you went back and watched that episode on ratios, you'll notice that it means that there's different amounts in each. So if we look really closely here, we can see that it's starting to separate out. So you can see down here, this will be our sand. So that kind of, it's a little bit tan. And then this dark part here, it's kind of like got stripes in it. That's our silt. And then this top part right here, that's our clay. And then of course this up here is just that water that we added in before. So those are the 3 different components that make up soil. And then yeah, like Kat was saying, the different ratios and the different mixtures are what makes soils different. So yeah, 3 main types, 3 main components, and you add them together to make different mixtures.
Even if you look at the difference between Mackenzie's jar and my jar has a lot less of that. I believe this was the clay layer. Mine has a lot less compared to Mackenzie's jar.
Wow.
Yeah, of course. So we got them from different places, so we can expect our soil to be a little bit different.
How interesting. Even though they both came from around the same city, they're so very different. That is fascinating. Kenzie, do you do something to your soil? Do you add stuff to it, possibly?
Sometimes we'll add things like grass clippings in the spring and the summer, but in general, we just have, I find our soil is a little bit more clayey. It's really like dense, some would say. So I think it really just has to do with what you're putting in your soil. We have a lot of grass in our yard, so maybe that has something to do with as well.
Wow, that is really awesome. I think we can get one more question in here. We have another question saying, what plants would grow in basic soil and which ones would grow in acidic soil?
All right, so I've checked the facts, I've done my research, and I know that certain plants that like basic soil would be things like kiwis, lilies, Daphne shrubs, and Manitoba maple trees really like basic soil.
Fascinating. It's really interesting how many different kinds of plants there are and how they are each their own unique little person. Okay, my scientists here, looks like you have some stuff out, Mackenzie. What's going on there?
Yes, so we've talked a lot about soil and the different components, the different properties of soil, but sometimes there's things that have nothing to do with our soil itself, and it affects how the soil helps our plants interacts, and that's something called erosion. And erosion is when we have like an environment or an ecosystem and things like wind or rain, things like that, they interfere with how it looks. So today we're going to do a little bit of an erosion experiment to see how different things can be put into our soil or on top of it, around it, to help to kind of stop the negative effects of erosion. So we're going to be, again, trying to keep some things consistent, and we're going to measure the different effects when we put water in it to see how it affects how the actual environment inside of each of our bottles holds up, but also how much water comes out. So to start here, we have our 3 bottles. Now we use 2-liter bottles. If you want to make a little bit of a smaller version, you can go ahead. We're keeping our 3 bottles the exact same size so that they're constant. Now just to kind of keep up with the constant, so our controls are the same, Kat and I are going to use one type of soil in all 3. So all of my soil came straight from my garden, and I'm going to put 1 cup of this soil in each. So the exact same amount, the exact same type. So I'm just going to go ahead, pour that in.
Interesting.
And they're all going to look the exact same at the start. So we got them in. And another thing I should mention is I left the bottle caps on for now because I don't want it spilling out the end. So I'm just going to leave that on. My favorite thing about this experiment today is that I get a little messy. I love getting messy in science.
And Mackenzie, what else are you just gonna leave it like that? Are you gonna add something else?
Great question. Yeah, so right now they're all the exact same. Now, to make them a little different, to test something, we're gonna add a few different things on top that we'd find in nature, maybe in some people's yards, to see how they affect it. So this one right here, I'm gonna leave it at the front of my desk. It just has soil in it. I'm gonna leave it like that. Now in my second bottle, I'm actually gonna add some wood chips. So I noticed in my yard, my dad was putting some wood chips around our trees, and I didn't really know why, so I thought, well, I'll research it a little bit, I'll put it on top, and then we'll find out the effects. So I'm going to go ahead and put this on top of mine.
You know, I'd like to know that answer too, because my mom puts wood chips in our flower garden. And I've never really understood why, because I always just thought, why are you putting a bunch of wood on the ground? I didn't understand the point.
All right. Cool. I got enough in there. Now, not all places have wood chips. Fiona, is there something else? Maybe, Kat, are you doing something different?
Yes, so I noticed around my garden, we have a bunch of rocks. And I'm not quite sure why we have a bunch of rocks around it, but I said, you know what? Hey, I'm doing a science experiment today, so I grabbed some of those rocks and I'm going to place them in my second bottle.
It's an avalanche.
Giant avalanche of rocks. Oh, I think I have enough rocks now. Yep.
Cool. Wow, we seem to be doing lots of different experiments today. We're going to get lots of data from this. I'm excited to see what's going on. Mackenzie, what's the next thing?
All right, so in my third bottle, I'm actually going to add some grass on top, or you can use any type of vegetation. So this, we just kind of mainly want something that has a lot of roots, because those roots are going to probably help us in this experiment. So you can see that I left my roots on my grass, and I'm kind of just going to stick my grass in on top and just have it sticking out the bottle. So we're going to have our grass in our third bottle. Now, we're talking about erosion, and in this experiment specifically, we're going to use water to demonstrate our erosion. So I'm just going to go down here and grab something else. Perfect. So we have these little containers. Now, you can use the top of your a pop bottle, a bowl, anything like that. And we're just going to hang them off the end of our pop bottles because we're going to be pouring our water into here. And what we mainly want to see in this experiment is if the different materials, so if those like wood chips, the grass, or the one with just nothing, makes a difference in how the the stuff in the pop bottle looks at the end and how much water gets into our container here. So I'm just going to put the one last container on my grass.
You know, Mackenzie, I think I'm going to make a quick hypothesis about which one is going to work the best.
Sounds good. What do you think?
And a hypothesis is an educated guess. So you're guessing what's going to happen based off of kind of the knowledge you already have. So my hypothesis is that I think the grass is going to work the best, because sometimes when I go to the lake or something, there's trees growing on the side of the lake, and I think that those roots work the same way as the grass is going to. It's going to hold the soil together.
Perfect. So what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to test these one at a time. So I'm just going to come out front so I can hold my container. So I'm going to take my lid off so that my water has a chance to flow out. So I'm just going to put it on the counter so I don't make a gigantic mess here. And I have 3 cups of water, and I'm using the exact same amount of water in each so that that remains constant. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pour the water in my bottle just like this. And then I'm going to pour it out into the jar.
Wow, your water is pretty murky looking. It's not very clear. I wouldn't want to drink that.
Yeah, so this is what we have from just the soil. So you can see that inside my bottle, things have kind of shifted around. Some of that dirt actually made its way into the water. Now I'm going to test my next one here, and I'll keep that water there just so we know. So do the exact same thing. I'm going to take the cap off here. I'm going to hold it, and then again, pour that in. And then I'm going to just tilt it up so the water has a chance to come out.
Wow, a lot less water came out there. And I think it looks a little bit clearer. And there's not as much stuff floating on top either, it seems.
Yeah, so we'll just put those side by side. You can see there's definitely a little bit of a difference. There's definitely more in just the soil. And now I'm going to test this last one. And
I really hope my hypothesis is right.
the same way, I'm going to dump it in right on top of that
Ooh.
grass. And then I'm just going to tilt it up just a little bit.
Wow.
All right, and that's the majority of the water there. So I'm going to sneak back here just so I can make a nice clear visual here for us. So I'm going to put them back to back. So Fiona, you noticed how you said there's more floating, and that's kind of, yeah, that's the difference here. So there's definitely less water as we went on, and it kind of got clearer. And I also just want you to take a moment to think about how this looks. So here, definitely some of the soil shifted. This one, I don't know, Fiona, you tell me, does it look kind of like the same as it did before? What do you think?
A little bit moved towards the front, but I would say it's still fairly even throughout the entire bottle.
And what do you think about the grass?
The grass looks the exact same to me. It still looks like a little grass hat on a bottle.
All right. All right, so I'm just going to let you, I'll come back and we'll talk about that more in a little minute, but.
And Kat, I have to ask, you used rocks instead of wood chips. How does that work? Have you tried it yet, or?
Well, I've had the water sit in there, so we'll dump our water and we'll see exactly what happens.
Well, I'm very excited.
Look at this.
There's lots of rocks everywhere, and you know, as a kid, I always picked up lots of rocks, so I have a collection of them. So I'd like to put my old child rock collection to use. Interesting. I don't see any floaties on top at all.
Huh. Very good.
Wow, Kat, I think it worked.
I think it did too. Maybe it's not such a bad thing that we have a bunch of rocks around our garden.
And if I look at your bottle as well, Kat, it seems like all the soil stayed in place. It didn't move around all over. It didn't go to the front. It didn't come out. So I think that was a success.
I think so as well. Now let's test my last piece of grass here and see what happens.
All right. It seems like you have a little less grass than Mackenzie had. Do you think that's going to make a difference?
I think so too, because when we were talking earlier about texture and water retention, if you have more grass, then you're going to retain a bit more water than if you have less grass. So let's see. Oh, that's a big floaty that just went out there.
We won't count that one.
It's definitely clearer.
Yeah.
Yes, it really is a lot clearer. Maybe those rocks were dirty too, though.
Yes.
I think they might have been.
So the main thing here is that the wood chips, the rocks, the grass, they're kind of acting like a filter. So the water is having to flow through it. It kind of filters it. Some of it stays with the grass and the rocks. So adding these things to our landscapes, having the different, like Fiona was saying before, having the cattails, the grass on the edges of lakes, it adds structure and stability to the soil and helps so that it doesn't break down as fast. So those are things that happen in our natural world, and they evolve to be a little bit stronger so that the landscapes don't get as affected by erosion. So that's something that happens in nature that is very cool.
Okay, so going through everything that I learned here, I learned about the soil, I learned about it has to be alive, I learned that I have to water it and make sure that the water is staying in it. I learned that the pH level has to be good for it. And, to be honest, I'm pretty sure I did all that with my plant that is dying, but it's still not growing because I'm positive that I took good care of it. So, Mackenzie, what am I doing wrong? If we went over everything and I'm doing it right, what is going on with my plant?
Well, Fiona, I think what you have here is a potato problem. I think that's what it is. I'm pretty sure it is a potato problem.
Oh my goodness.
Now, luckily, I actually know a little bit about this. And what happens, even though, there's soil, it's living, one thing that we haven't talked about yet is that soil can get sick. Now, soil has these living things in it that Kat taught us before. It has those bacteria, that fungi. Now, a lot of this, like the bacteria in our stomach, things like that, is really good. So there is some good fungi that creates these relationships with the plants and in the soil. So in an earlier episode, we talked about something called a symbiosis. Now, a symbiosis is when something creates a relationship. So we have two things, and they're creating a relationship and interacting with each other. Now, when there's good fungi, there's something called a mutualism. So this component and this component, it's benefiting both of them. So they're getting a good deal out of it. They're both happy in the end. So we have a graphic here that I'm going to show you. And in this graphic, you're going to be able to see. So the stuff that looks kind of fuzzy on the end in the soil, that's fungi. Now the fungi's happy because it gets to grow on the roots and have a place to live. But the plant is happy because the fungi is acting like an extension from the roots, and it's actually increasing the surface area so it has a bigger opportunity to get more water and more nutrients from the soil that surrounds it. So that's called a mutualism, and that is when the fungi and the soil and the plant are all happy. Now, Fiona, you said your plant's still not doing well, so my best scientific guess would be that it's not a mutualism, that there is a symbiosis happening, but it's not benefiting both people. So it's most likely benefiting the bacteria or the fungi that's making it, but it's making the plant sick. So it's negative for the plant and positive for the fungi or the bacteria. So when this happens, sometimes this will happen in our house plants. There will be something like root rot, things like that. So we can see that in the soil, there's something growing in there. Sometimes it'll look a little fuzzy or make it a different color, things like that. That's when the soil is kind of like getting sick. Like we can get sick as humans, so can our soil. So in that case, because soil is a living thing, we need to help the soil get better. So there's things that we can treat our soil with, or you might just have to change the plant's environment. So you might need to dig that plant out and put it in different soil that is healthy. Do you think that might help you and solve your potato problem, Fiona?
I think so. I will definitely go home and do some research and see if maybe my plant has some weaknesses towards certain bacteria, and maybe I can help make it healthy again.
I hope so, because I love plants just as much as I love soil.
I really hope so too. Well, now we are going to go into a fun time where we are going to ask our scientists. We have a few lovely questions from some of our viewers. Our first one here is, can you grow plants without soil? Do you know?
Kat, you seem very excited to answer this.
Yes, so you can. There are certain plants called hydroponic plants that they just grow in a solution of water and dissolved nutrients. So yes, some plants can grow without soil, but they are called hydroponic plants.
Wow, that's a really big word. That's pretty cool. I don't think I'd be able to keep those alive, considering my plant in soil isn't doing very well.
You'll have to test it out and see.
Maybe
Yeah.
maybe I will. All right, we have a question here from Hannah. They ask, do nuts grow from trees? Mackenzie, do you know?
Yes, of course. This is a great question. So tree nuts, they grow on trees, but something like peanuts, they are grown underground and then they're considered legumes. So a nut like a Brazil nut or an almond, they grow on trees. So those are considered tree nuts. So sometimes you'll hear in allergies, some people are allergic to tree nuts, and those are the nuts that grow on trees. And then there are those nuts like peanuts that grow underground as well.
Wow, I didn't know peanuts grew in the ground. That gives me a whole new perspective. Okay, and we have the Hayes brothers are asking, why do earthworms like soil better than dirt?
So earthworms, they like soil better than dirt because soil has all those wonderful living things and nutrients in the soil that earthworms like to eat. So they like soil because it's a good snack compared to dirt, which has nothing for earthworms.
Wow.
Mhm.
So, what kind of thing? Do you know what earthworms eat at all, or?
We'd have to check back at headquarters to figure out what earthworms eat.
Okay, that's okay. All right. And someone asked again, what kind of plants grow in acidic soil? Do you guys? Does either of you know?
Yeah, so sometimes there's things like evergreens, they grow in soil, and actually they have like their pine needles and they drop. And when those pine needles drop, they actually affect the soil pH. So that's kind of like a natural adaptation that those trees adapted to kind of help themselves. So they help themselves and they drop their needles every so often, and it helps the soil. And sometimes I've heard of gardeners and people in greenhouses and stuff, and they add like things like pennies and stuff to the soil, and what they're trying to do is change the pH. So yeah, like things like evergreens, willow, oak, even sometimes like blueberries, daffodils, they're all things that like acidic soil.
That is super cool. I didn't know that. And that's really interesting how some plants make their own adaptations to make soil how they want it. Unfortunately, that is all the time we have for today. I want to thank all of you who are watching. Thank you so much for giving us this support. And also thank you to our supporters, Actua and the University of Regina. We always have an awesome time, and tune in to tomorrow's episode.
All right, see you
Bye.
later. Bye.